the Ugly Duckling. It was so glorious out in the country. It was summer. The cornfields were yellow, the oats were green, the hay had been put up in stacks in the green meadows, and the stork went about on his long red legs. All around the fields and meadows were great forests, and in the midst of these forests lay deep lakes. It was really beautiful out in the country. In the midst of the sunshine there lay an old farm with deep ponds about it. Over and next to the ponds were beautiful wooden docks that little children would sit on, throwing pebbles into and across the ponds. Not far from one of the docks sat Gracie Duck on her nest. She had to hatch her ducklings. She was so very tired of sitting on her nest for hours at a time while the other ducks swam about in the ponds and lakes. They were, of course, friendly little ducks and would swim close to her nest and chat a bit every morning. Finally, after much waiting, one egg after another crackled open. Gracie Duck nuzzled them lovingly with her beak as they appeared out of every egg. Delightful little quacks filled the air as the little ducklings curiously and excitedly ventured around the nest. Gracie Duck kept a close eye on them. With much more space than they had had inside of their snug little eggs, the ducklings quacked about, exploring every leaf, pebble, and twig.
"Oh, this world is so big."
"Do you really think this is the whole world?"
said Gracie.
"The land goes far across to the other side of the pond and past the lake. On the other side is the gold forest, which I've heard about but never been to. I think it's a good time to go. What do you think?"
The ducklings all chirped their delight and excitement about a new adventure despite being only an hour old. But as Gracie stood up, she noticed a final egg in her nest that was yet to hatch.
"Oh, I had completely forgotten about you,"
she said, looking at the largest egg. Warm, but not even a small crack, Gracie knew she had to wait a bit longer before she could venture out with her other children. She sat down again.
"Maybe in a few days, children,"
she said to her ducklings. They had, of course, already found new amusements all around them.
"Well, how goes it?"
asked an old duck a few days later. She had come to pay Gracie a visit as usual every few days.
"Excellent,"
said Gracie dryly. The old duck peered at the nest.
"No cracks yet?"
she asked.
"Not yet,"
said Gracie.
"Just look at the others, though. Are they not the prettiest little ducks one could possibly see?"
"Let me take a look,
said the old visitor.
just in case it's a turkey's egg. I was once treated in that way. A while back, a sneaky turkey stacked her eggs in my nest while I was out for a quick swim. Frightened me immensely, because when they hatched, they were afraid of the water. I tell you, I couldn't get them to put even a toe in. I quacked and I clucked, but it was no use. Let me see the egg."
The old duck leaned in.
"Yep, that's a turkey's egg." "I say, let it lie there. You have other real children to teach."
"I think I'll sit on it a little longer,"
said Gracie, not entirely sure that she believed the older duck.
"I've sat so long now that I can sit a few more days, even if it is a turkey's egg. At least I did it right."
"Suit yourself,"
said the old duck, and she waddled off. That night the great big egg crackled and crunched until, with a wiggle and shuffle, it crept out. Gracie, half asleep but instantly grateful, eyed her last baby in horror. The duckling was very large and very odd-looking. Gracie looked at it confused and a little frightened.
"You're a very large duckling, aren't you?"
she said, trying not to sound too frightened.
You don't look at all like the rest of your siblings. Maybe you really are a turkey chick."
Then, remembering what the older duck had said the afternoon before, Gracie knew how to make certain what kind of chick she was looking at.
"Well, we'll soon find out. You'll go into the water, even if I have to push you in myself."
The next day started with bright, beautiful weather. The sun shone on all the green trees. Gracie Duck went down to the pond with all her little ducklings for their first family swim. Gracie jumped into the water. She said, calling out to her children. One duckling after another plunged into the cool water. The water washed over their heads, but only for a moment, until they popped up above the surface again and swam about, kicking their legs back and forth. Gracie Duck turned towards the shore, watching with pride as her ducklings confidently plunged into the water, fearless and brave. A tear came to her eye as she gazed at the fluffy tufts of yellow fuzz of her children as they dived into the pond. Noting her newest duckling, Gracie gave him a good look in the morning light. He really was an ugly creature, greyishy brown all over, with a black beak and black feet. It was an ache to see him standing next to her custard yellow angels. Looking back and forth between the two types of ducklings, Gracie cringed inwardly, knowing that he couldn't possibly be hers, and watched in anticipation as he edged his way closer to the water, and then stopped. Breathing a small sigh of relief, she smiled, satisfied that he was in fact a turkey. She turned around and swirled around her ducklings, ushering them back to shore.
Hi, Mama.
Gracie glided directly into the ugly duckling. Apparently, he had got into the water in the few seconds after she had turned to gather her other ducklings.
"Oh, hello, dear,"
and swayed around him, followed by her flush of ducklings, and glanced back slightly as he joined them at the back.
"So, he's not a turkey?"
she said.
"Scuttles well, back straight. I suppose he is mine. Probably got those features from his father's side. I suppose he could be pretty if you looked at him differently. Perhaps with one eye. Half shut. At night. Come on, darlings, and I'll lead you into the great world beyond the lake. I'll introduce you in the duckyard, but keep close to me, so that no one steps on you, and beware of the cats."
The unusual little flock waddled into the duckyard. There was a terrible riot going on in there. Two families were arguing about a fish's head, and amidst the shouting, a cat had crept in and snagged it for himself.
"See? That's how it goes in the world,"
said Gracie Duck.
"Straight up on those legs now,"
she said.
"See that you really swing into your waddle. Then bow your head before the old duck on the far side. She's the grandest of all here. She's of Spanish blood. That's why she's so fat and honored. See? She has a red rag around her leg. That's something particularly fancy. It's the greatest honor a duck can enjoy. It signifies that some human does not want to lose her, and that she's to be known by the animals and by men too. Flap your winglets, dears. Toes in. Pop those heads back and forward."
Gracie Duck continued to rattle off instructions to her brood as they marched past the other ducks and chatted to each other at the interests that passed them through the barn. The flush of ducklings marched on proudly, motivated by their mother, and ushered on faster as they walked deeper in past the eyes of all the ducks. Thankfully, the ducklings seemed not to notice the curious comments and prying questions that trailed their parade.
Look there. One thing is not like the other.
Chuckled a mallard.
Isn't it bad enough that she's got more than a dozen? A little dash of pepper at the back of the line as well?
said the white-headed whistler, growing more nervous as the comments continued. Gracie dipped her head even further, trying to push her ducklings a little faster, but they seemed to be travelling as fast as they could and began to tumble over each other. The ducks roared in laughter. Gracie swung her wings out and tried to pull her flush back together again. A duck flew up toward Gracie and her ducklings and snapped at the ugly duckling's neck.
"Back off, Donald,"
said Gracie, swatting off the rude duck.
"He's not interfering with anyone."
"Yes, but he's too big and strange-looking,"
said Donald.
"We don't need those features in our line, Gracie. He's got to be put down."
Those are pretty tools, Grimm, that you've got there.
Said the old duck with the rag around her leg.
They're all pretty, but that was rather unlucky.
"Yes, my lady,"
replied Gracie.
He's not as pretty as my other children, but he's wonderfully cheerful and swims as well as any other, maybe better even. Maybe he will grow up pretty and become smaller in time. He was in the egg quite a while after the others, and that's why he's that shape."
Gracie smoothed Cole's feathers where Donald had bit him. She smiled, realizing she had just named the ugly duckling after the colour of Cole, but a name nonetheless. She also sensed a bit of pride despite how he looked, and added,
"He's a drake, you know,"
she said.
"I think he will be very strong. He's the strongest already."
Cole looked up at his mother, feeling a little less terrified now that she was beside him.
The other ducklings are graceful enough,
said the old duck.
"Make yourself at home, my dear, and if you find a fish's head, you may bring it to me."
Despite the acknowledgment from the Spanish duck, the poor ugly duckling Cole was bitten and pushed and jeered as much by the rest of the ducks as by the chickens. The turkey cock, who had been born with spurs and therefore thought himself an emperor, puffed himself up like a ship in full sail and flew straight at Cole. Then he gobbled and grew quite red in the face. Cole did not know where to stand or walk, and was quite sad, because it was clear by everyone's reaction to him today that he was in fact quite ugly. So it went on from the first day to the next, and afterwards it became worse and worse. Cole was hunted about by everyone. Even his brothers and sisters were quite angry with him for drawing so much mean attention towards their entire family. They teased him daily, saying,
"Maybe he was born in the fireplace and then snuck into Mommy's nest. Or maybe he fell out the chimney and was blown to us."
Tormented by being kind to her strange child and the undeniable truth of his unusual features, Gracie stroked his head as he slept.
"If only they could see. You're just the same in most other ways."
After many weeks of torment from everyone around him, Cole could stand it no longer. He woke before the sun rose the next morning and snuck away from his mother.
"Goodbye, Mama. I won't make it harder for you any longer."
Cole ran and flew over the fence, and the little birds in the bushes flew up in fear from seeing his greyish-brown creature pelting towards them.
"That's because I'm so ugly,"
thought Cole, and he shut his eyes and flew on farther. He came out into the great forest on the edge of the golden forest where the wild ducks lived. He lay there all night long, feeling tired and filled with despair. Towards morning, the wild ducks flew up and looked at their new companion.
"What sort of one are you?"
they asked, and Cole turned in every direction and bowed as well as he could.
"Ooh, you're remarkably ugly,"
said the wild ducks.
"But we don't care. You're not our family."
Just about having had enough of everyone's opinions, Cole waddled off away from the terrible wild ducks, saying nothing. He certainly didn't plan on being part of anyone's family, especially after the one he just escaped. All he wanted was a spot beside the reeds to sleep, and everyone to leave him alone. Cole lay there for 2 whole days and only picked up his head when 2 wild ganders walked his way.
Oh, great. New guys.
Hey, buddy,
Said one of them.
you're so ugly that I like you. Do you want to come with us? Not far from here, near the Golden Forest, is a group of birds of every shape and color. There are a bunch of gals there too. I'm sure they'll take to you being so weird.
Resounded through the air, and the 2 ganders took off into the air, screeching in fear. It sounded again, and the whole flock of wild geese rose up from the reeds. Cole trembled, unable to move. He had no idea that he'd just stepped into the wilds during hunting season. Huntsmen were aimed and ready all around the forest, and some were even sitting up in the branches of the trees, which spread far over the reeds. Gunshots echoed, and dogs barked into the swamp, and the rushes and the reeds bent down on every side. Cole turned his head and put it under his wing, but at that moment a frightful great dog stood close by him. His tongue hung far out of his mouth, and his eyes gleamed horribly. He shoved his nose against Cole, nudged him, and then splashed off down the trails again. So Cole lay quite still, while the shots rattled through the reeds. At last, late in the day, all was finally quiet, but poor little Cole did not dare get up. He waited many hours before he looked around, and then quickly waddled away out of the forest as fast as he could. Cole ran over field and meadow. There was such a storm raging that it was difficult to get from one place to another. Towards evening he came to a little peasant's hut. This hut was so dilapidated that Cole did not know on which side it would fall. The storm whistled round in such a way that the poor creature had to sit down. The wind blew worse and worse. Then he noticed that one of the hinges of the door had given away, and the door hung so slanting that Cole could slip through the crack into the room. There lived a woman with her cat and her hen. The cat, whom she called Sunny, could arch his back and purr. He could even give out sparks, but to make him do it, one had to stroke his fur the wrong way. The hen had quite little short legs, and therefore she was called Pixaby Shortshanks. She laid good eggs, and the woman loved her like her own child. In the morning, Cole was at once noticed, and the cat began to purr, and the hen to cluck.
Oh, what's this?
Said the woman, and looked all around, but she could not see well, and she thought Cole was a fat duck that had strayed.
This is a rare prize,
she said.
Now I'll have duck eggs. I do hope he's not a drake. Can you lay eggs?
The hen asked.
No.
The cat said,
Can you curve your back and purr and give out sparks?
No. Cole sat quietly in the corner, but began to have an urge to swim. He told the hen.
What you thinking of?
Cried the hen.
You're just bored. Lay eggs or purr, and the mistress of the house will keep you. But it's wonderful to swim on the water,
said Cole.
So refreshing to let it close above your head and to dive to the bottom.
Yes, that must be wonderful, said the hen.
I think you've gone crazy. Ask the cat about it. He's the cleverest animal I know. Ask him if he likes to swim on the water or to dive down. Ask our mistress, the old woman. No one in the world is cleverer than she. Do you think she has any desire to swim and to let the water close above her head? You don't understand me, said Cole. We don't understand you. Then who will understand you? You surely don't think you're smarter than the cat and the woman. Don't be silly, child, and thank your Maker for all the kindness you've received from us.
Did you not get into a warm room, and have you not fallen into great company? But you are a chatterer, and it is not pleasant to associate with you. Trust me, I tell you the honest, brutal truth, so you know I'm a real friend. Just learn to lay eggs or purr and give out sparks."
"I think I should leave,"
said Cole.
Yes, then go,"
replied the hen. And so Cole left. Finding the lake, he swam on the water and dived. But he was teased by every creature because of his ugliness. Then came the autumn. The leaves in the forest turned yellow and gold. The wind caught them so that they danced about, and up in the air it was very cold. The clouds hung low, heavy with hail and snowflakes, and on the fence stood the raven, crying in the cold. Poor little Cole certainly had a terrible time. One evening the sun was just setting in its beauty. There came a whole flock of great, handsome birds out of the bushes. They were dazzlingly white, with long, smooth necks. They were swans. They uttered a very peculiar cry, spread out their gloriously great wings, and flew away from that cold region to warmer lands, to fair, open lakes. They flew so high, and Cole felt quite strange as he watched them. He turned round and round in the water like a wheel, stretched out his neck towards them, and uttered such a strange, loud cry that he frightened himself. Oh, he could not forget those beautiful, happy birds, and when he could see them no longer, he dived down to the very bottom. And when he came up again, he was beside himself. He didn't know the name of those birds, and he didn't know where they were flying, but he loved them more than he had ever loved anyone, drawn to them in a mysterious way. He was not at all envious of them. How could he think of wishing to be that beautiful? He would have been glad if only the ducks would have put up with his company. The poor ugly creature. The winter grew cold, very cold. Cole was forced to swim about in the water to prevent the surface from freezing completely. But every night the hole in which he swam became smaller and smaller. It froze so hard that the ice covering crackled, and he had to use his legs continually to stop the hole from freezing up. At last he became exhausted and lay still and froze into the ice. Early in the morning, a peasant came by, and when he saw what had happened, he took his wooden shoe, broke the ice crust to pieces, and carried the bird home to his wife. The children wanted to play with it, but Cole thought they wanted to hurt him, and in his terror fluttered up into the milk jug so the milk spurted everywhere. The woman gasped, at which Cole flew down into the butter tub, and then into the pot of porridge and out again. How he looked then! The woman screamed and struck at him with her hands. The children tumbled over one another in their efforts to catch Cole, and they laughed, and he screamed. Seeing the door open, the poor creature was able to slip out between the shrubs and the newly fallen snow, where he lay quite exhausted. That was just the beginning of the hardship Cole faced that winter. He lay out on the moor, among the reeds, braving the cold as best he could, until when the sun began to warm again and the robins began to sing. It was a beautiful spring. Without even thinking, Cole flapped his wings. They beat the air more strongly than before, and before he knew how all this happened, he found himself in a great garden, where the elder trees smelt sweet, and bent their long green branches down to the lake. Oh, it was beautiful, such a joy of spring. Moments later, From the thicket came 3 glorious white swans. They rustled their wings and swam lightly in the water. Cole knew these splendid creatures.
I will fly to them, to the royal birds, and they will beat me, because I'm so ugly. They'll hurt me and try to chase me away, just like all the others have. But who cares? Better to be killed by them than to be pecked at by ducks and beaten by fowls and pushed about by a turkey, and to suffer hunger in winter.
With that, Cole flew out into the water and swam towards the beautiful swans. They looked at him and came sailing down towards him with outspread wings.
Here they come to kill me,
said the poor creature, and closed his eyes. But before even a peck, Cole heard the voices of humans in the distance, and remembering the hunters from months ago, he charged past the swans towards the edge of the lake. He cried out,
"Don't hurt them, just take me."
Cole bent his head down in the water, expecting nothing but death. But what was this that he saw in the clear water? He gazed at his reflection, confused. Was that really him? He turned his head to the left, and then to the right, watching as the reflection mirrored his movements. He was no longer a clumsy, coal-colored bird, ugly and hateful to look at, but a swan. Brought to attention again by the sounds of humans, he looked up into the garden. Little children came running to the water, and instead of pebbles being thrown towards him, they threw bread and corn into the water. The youngest cried out,
Whoa!
and the other children shouted joyously. They clapped their hands and danced about and ran to their father and mother, and bread and cake were thrown into the water. And they all said,
The new one is the most beautiful of all, so young and handsome.
The other swans Cole had stormed past joined him at his sides and bowed their heads before him, admiring not just his incomparable beauty, but his humility, bravery, and grace. Cole felt a kind of warmth and fullness, not from the rays of the sun, nor the fire in a small hut, but a contentment in seeing himself to be just what his reflection showed. His feathers were gleaming in the sunshine, and he smiled with a joy he could never explain. The cruelty of his days as a duckling, a faint shadow of the past. He raised his head up into the light and spread his grand wings. The great swans swam round him and nodded and tapped their heads against his in greeting. He thought of how he had been teased and hated, and now heard the other swans and the humans saying that he was the most beautiful of all birds. The sun shone gently against him, making his feathers glint like silver in the light. He lifted his slender neck and cried out from the depths of his heart,
An ugly duckling? Where? I'm at home at last, Mama. If only you could see me now.